She handpicked your outfits. She curated your circle of friends. She determined your very aspirations. And if you dared to voice a different opinion, she wasn't just annoyed. She was deeply, personally wounded, as if you had betrayed her at the very core of her being. You grew up never quite knowing where she ended, and you began, because to her you weren't a separate person, a distinct individual. You were an extension of herself, a limb, a part of her own body that had somehow sprouted legs and started walking around. If this sounds hauntingly familiar, this video is going to expose the most suffocating and insidious dynamic of maternal narcissism, the kind that leaves you questioning your own sanity. Carl Jung, that pioneering figure in psychology, discovered why certain mothers are fundamentally incapable of seeing their children as separate individuals, and why this creates a prison without bars, a psychic cage from which escape seems almost impossible. You weren't raised, you were absorbed. Hold on, that statement will make complete sense in the next few minutes, and when it does, you'll finally have the words to describe something you've always felt, but could never quite articulate. Before we continue, a crucial pause. If you value content that goes beyond surface-level platitudes, that genuinely explains what happened to you, consider subscribing. This channel exists to bring you the uncomfortable truths most psychology channels don't dare to touch. And if you're already a subscriber, hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. Now, let's get to the heart of the matter. Every human being is born into a state of fusion with their mother. This is entirely normal. In the first months of life, the infant genuinely doesn't know they are a person separate from their mother. They experience the world as an extension of her, and she ideally experiences the baby as an extension of herself. This state of fusion is necessary for survival. The baby needs a mother so attuned that she can anticipate its needs, and the mother needs to feel the baby as part of herself in order to instinctively respond to those needs. The problem begins when this fusion doesn't naturally dissolve. In healthy development, the child gradually begins to perceive themselves as separate. They discover they have their own desires, their own preferences, their own thoughts. And the healthy mother, though she may feel a pang of loss, allows and encourages this separation, but the narcissistic mother cannot do this. To her, the child's separation isn't a natural step in development. It's an existential threat. It's abandonment. It's betrayal. The child who begins to have their own will is, in her perception, rejecting her. And this is where the concept of the narcissistic extension comes in. The narcissistic extension occurs when one person uses another as a part of themselves, not as a separate individual with their own rights, needs, and identity, but as an appendage, a tool, an instrument to regulate their own self-esteem. For the narcissistic mother, the child exists to fulfill specific functions, to reflect positively upon her, to achieve the dreams she didn't, to fill the emotional void she carries, to serve as proof that she's a good mother, a good person, someone worthy of admiration. The child isn't seen as a human being in formation. They're seen as an extension of the maternal ego. Jung spoke about this through the concept of mystical participation. It's a primitive state of consciousness where the boundaries between self and other aren't clearly defined. In a sense, the narcissistic mother never fully developed the capacity to perceive the child as other. She looks at the child and sees herself, not metaphorically, literally. The child is her, and she is the child. Any differentiation is experienced as a narcissistic wound. The question you're probably asking yourself is, how does this manifest in everyday life? What are the signs that your mother treated you as an extension of herself? First sign, she couldn't tolerate you having opinions different from hers. I'm not talking about normal disagreements between parents and children. I'm talking about a fundamental inability to accept that you could think differently. If you said you liked blue and she liked red, she couldn't simply accept that difference. She needed to convince you that you also liked red, or she became visibly disturbed by your different preference, or she reinterpreted your preference as a personal attack. It doesn't matter if she did this explicitly or subtly. The result was the same. You learned that having a different opinion caused pain, and to avoid that pain, you stopped having opinions of your own. Second sign, she lived through you. Your successes were her successes, your failures were her failures, and she made a point of making that clear. When you won an award at school, she accepted the congratulations. When you had a problem, she suffered more than you did. Your life wasn't yours. It was a stage where she was the protagonist, even when she wasn't on stage. Jung called this projection of psychic content. The mother projects her own ambitions, fears, desires, and frustrations onto the child, and she begins to experience the child's life as if it were her own life. This might seem like intense love, but it's not love. It's appropriation. It's the inability to see the other as separate. It's using the child as a vehicle to live a second life. Third sign, she obsessively controlled details of your life that should have been your choice. What you wore, what you ate, who you played with, what you studied, what profession you should pursue, who you should date. And every time you tried to make an independent choice, she reacted as if you were destroying her life. This obsessive control didn't come from genuine concern for your well-being. It came from the narcissistic need to maintain control over an extension of herself. An arm doesn't decide where it goes. The brain decides, and she was the brain. You were just the arm. Fourth sign, you felt like you weren't allowed to exist separately. This is harder to describe, but you'll probably recognize the sensation. A constant feeling that your existence as an individual was somehow wrong, that having your own thoughts, feelings, desires was a kind of betrayal, that existing outside of her was dangerous. Many people who were treated as narcissistic extensions describe a feeling of emptiness when they're alone, as if they only truly exist in relation to another person, because that's exactly what they learned, that their existence only had validity as an extension. Fifth sign, she couldn't tolerate your growth and independence. Each developmental milestone was experienced by her as a loss. When you started walking, she felt like she was losing you. When you went to school, she was devastated. When you made friends, she felt betrayed. When you wanted to date, she was furious. A healthy mom feels a natural blend of joy and wistfulness as her child grows. She celebrates milestones even while feeling that time is slipping away too quickly. But a narcissistic mom experiences each step towards independence as an active abandonment, and she communicates this to her child in ways both subtle and explicit. You're leaving me. You don't care about me anymore. You've changed. I don't even know you anymore. You've chosen others instead of me. The message the child receives is that growing up is betrayal, that becoming independent is abandoning her, that having a life of your own is destroying hers. Now, let me tell you about Ashley. That's not her real name, but the story is real. Ashley was an only child. From the moment she was born, she was the absolute center of her mother's world. Her mom stopped working to dedicate herself entirely to her. She stopped seeing her circle of friends. She stopped having hobbies. Ashley became her sole reason for existing. Ashley was dressed exactly how her mom wanted. Her hair was cut the way her mom preferred. She took ballet because her mom had dreamed of being a ballerina. She played piano because her mom thought it was elegant. Her friends were chosen by her mom. Her activities were determined by her mom. Ashley didn't have what Carl Jung called a self. She had a mask, a persona, perfectly molded to her mother's desires. And the most disturbing thing is that Ashley seemed happy. She was a well-behaved, obedient child who never caused any trouble. Other parents envied Ashley's mom. What a perfect daughter. What an exemplary upbringing. But beneath that perfect surface, something was deeply, profoundly wrong. Ashley didn't know who she was, didn't know what she truly liked, didn't know what she truly felt. She only knew how to be what her mom wanted her to be. And that which seemed like perfection was actually a psychic cage, a prison without bars. At 16, Ashley had her first panic attack. She was at school, away from her mom, when she suddenly felt like she was disappearing, that she didn't exist, that she was a ghost. She ran to the bathroom and called her mom, sobbing. Her mom came to pick her up immediately, and in her mother's arms, Ashley felt real again. She only existed when her mom was around. That was the first of many episodes. Ashley developed a paralyzing separation anxiety, couldn't sleep away from home, couldn't travel, couldn't do anything without her mom nearby. Her mom, instead of seeing this as a problem, secretly felt important. Her daughter needed her. Her daughter couldn't live without her. This confirmed what she had always known, that they were one, that they were destined to be together forever. Ashley only discovered what had happened at 28, when a therapist was finally able to name the dynamic. You were treated as a narcissistic extension. You never developed a sense of separate self. Your anxiety is the fear of disintegrating when separated from your mom. Ashley's initial reaction was denial. My mom loves me. She sacrificed everything for me. She's the only person who truly understands me. It took months of therapy for Ashley to begin to see the reality that what seemed like love was actually possession, that what seemed like sacrifice was actually control, that what seemed like connection was actually pathological fusion. Now, I need to explain something crucial: why some moms treat their children as narcissistic extensions, not to justify, not to excuse, but to understand. Narcissistic moms generally had their own emotional development interrupted. They grew up with deep narcissistic wounds, with a fragile sense of self, with a constant need for external validation to feel real. When these women have children, they see an opportunity in the child, not consciously but unconsciously, an opportunity to finally fill the void they carry, to have someone who loves them unconditionally, to create a version of themselves that is perfect. The child isn't seen as a human being with their own needs. It's seen as a second chance at life, an opportunity to correct everything that went wrong the first time. Jung explained that people with deep narcissistic wounds often have difficulty perceiving the other as separate. This is because their own sense of self is so fragile that any differentiation is experienced as a threat of fragmentation. The narcissistic mom literally can't perceive the child as other. She looks at him and sees herself. And when he begins to show that he is different from her, she experiences it as if a part of her own body were rebelling against her. This explains the intensity of the reaction when the child tries to separate. It's not just anger, it's panic, it's terror of disintegration. For the narcissistic mom, the child separating is as if she were losing an arm. It's as if her body were falling apart. But understanding this doesn't mean accepting it. Understanding the origin of the behavior doesn't change the damage it causes. And the damage of being treated as a narcissistic extension is deep and long-lasting. Let's talk about the effects. First effect: difficulty in knowing who you are. If you've spent your life being an extension of your mom, it's very likely that you haven't developed your own identity. You may reach adulthood without knowing what you truly like, without knowing what you truly want, without knowing who you are when no one is looking. Many people who were narcissistic extensions describe a feeling of inner emptiness, as if there were a space where there should be a self. They know how to be what others expect, but they don't know how to be themselves. Jung talked about the difference between the persona and the self. The persona is the social mask we wear. The self is who we really are. People who were narcissistic extensions often develop elaborate personas, but never access the self. They learn to perform identity, but not to live it. Second effect, extreme separation anxiety. If your existence has always depended on another person, the idea of being separated can be terrifying. You may feel panic when you're alone. You may cling to relationships even when they are damaging. You may feel that you will disappear if you don't have someone nearby. This anxiety isn't weakness. It's a direct consequence of never having developed the capacity to exist separately. Your nervous system has been programmed for fusion. Separation activates primitive survival alarms. Third effect, difficulty in relationships. You may notice that your adult relationships repeat patterns from the relationship with your mom. You may attract controlling partners. You may feel responsible for the feelings of others. You may get lost in relationships, forgetting who you are. Or you may go in the opposite direction, avoiding relationships altogether, for fear of losing your identity again, maintaining extreme emotional distance, running when someone gets too close. Both responses are attempts to deal with a fundamental problem, the inability to be in a relationship while maintaining a sense of separate self. Either you merge or you avoid, because you never learned the third option, connection with separation. Fourth effect, chronic guilt. If you grew up with the message that existing separately was betraying your mom, you're very likely to carry a constant guilt. Guilt for having your own thoughts, guilt for having your own aspirations, guilt for existing independently. This guilt can sabotage everything in your life. You might feel bad when you succeed because your mom didn't. You might feel wrong when you're happy because your mom isn't. You might unconsciously punish yourself for every step of independence. Guilt is the invisible chain that keeps you tied to the merger, even when you're physically far away. Fifth effect, repressed rage. Beneath the guilt, there's almost always rage. Rage for having been used, rage for never having been seen as a person, rage for the years lost, being an extension. But this rage is often unbearable, because how can you be angry at someone who claims to love you so much? How can you be angry at someone who sacrificed everything for you? The rage feels like ingratitude. It feels like cruelty. It feels like proof that you really are the horrible person you've always feared being. The rage stays buried and manifests in other ways: depression, anxiety, physical ailments, seemingly disproportionate outbursts in the face of minor frustrations. Important pause here. If this content is resonating with you, if you're recognizing your own story in these words, consider showing your support through super thanks. It's the golden heart that appears right below the video. Each contribution helps maintain this work of bringing truths that most channels don't dare to explore. You're not just supporting a channel, you're helping to free other people who are still trapped, being extensions of their moms. Continuing. Now let's talk about healing, about what's possible. When you start to understand what happened, the first step is the most difficult. It's recognizing reality, accepting that what you experienced wasn't healthy love, accepting that your mom, regardless of her intentions, caused real damage, accepting that you have the right to exist separately. This is difficult because it goes against everything you were taught. You were programmed to see merging as love, separation as betrayal, independence as abandonment. Reprogramming these beliefs takes time, and it's painful. because it means questioning the fundamental narrative of your life. It means accepting that something that seemed like love was actually prison. The second step is grieving. You need to grieve the mom you never had, the childhood that was never yours, the self you were never allowed to develop. This grief is profound and can last a long time. You might feel waves of sadness for no apparent reason. You might cry for things you never experienced. You might feel a loss that you can't name. Allow yourself this grief. It's necessary. It's your psyche's way of processing what happened. The third step is what Carl Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you really are. For someone who was a narcissistic extension, individuation has a special meaning, because you're not just becoming yourself, you're discovering who you are for the first time. This means experimenting, discovering what you truly like, what you don't like, what you think about things, what you feel about things, without your mom's voice in your head dictating the answers. It might seem simple, but for someone who's lived their whole life being an extension, discovering a preference of their own can be revolutionary and terrifying and liberating. The fourth step is setting boundaries, and it's perhaps the most difficult of all. Boundaries with your mom mean accepting that she's going to react badly. She's going to feel betrayed. She's going to try to guilt trip you. She might get furious or depressed, or both, and you're going to feel overwhelming guilt. But boundaries are essential, because without them, you'll never be able to exist separately. Without them, you'll continue being sucked back into the merger every time you try to differentiate. Boundaries don't necessarily mean cutting off contact. They can simply mean saying no when before you would say yes, having your own opinions, even when she disagrees, making choices based on what you want, not what she expects. And every time you maintain a boundary, you're building something. You're building a self, piece by piece, boundary by boundary. You're becoming a separate person. The fifth step is developing healthy relationships, relationships where you can be yourself and still be connected, where separation doesn't mean abandonment, where difference doesn't mean threat. This may require professional help. A therapist who understands this dynamic can be fundamental, because you'll need a different relationship model. Someone who sees you as separate and still accepts you. Someone who celebrates your differentiation instead of punishing it. Let me tell you what happened to Ashley. Ashley stayed in therapy for 3 years. It wasn't easy. There were times when she wanted to give up, times when she ran back into her mom's arms, times when the guilt felt too much. But she persisted, and little by little, something started to change. She discovered she liked to cook, something her mom had never allowed. She discovered she preferred colorful clothes, not the neutral colors her mom chose. She discovered she had political opinions different from her mom, and that it was okay. Every small discovery was an accomplishment. Every personal preference was a piece of self being built. The relationship with her mom changed, not because her mom changed, she probably never will, but because Ashley changed. She learned to maintain boundaries, to withstand the guilt, to exist as a separate person. Even when her mom tried to drag her back into the merger, Ashley still has anxiety sometimes, still feels guilt sometimes. These deep wounds leave scars, but she's no longer an extension. She's a person with a self of her own, with a life of her own. That's the promise I want to leave with you today. Not a promise of easy or quick healing, but a promise that separation is possible, that you can become a whole person, that there is a you beyond the extension that your mom created. The first step is the most difficult. It's simply recognizing I was treated as an extension. I wasn't allowed to be a separate person, and that wasn't love. It was prison, according to Carl Jung. From there, Each step becomes a little lighter, not because the journey is easy, but because you're finally walking toward yourself, not toward what your mum wanted you to be. You're not an extension. You never were. You were a separate person from the very first moment. A person with the right to exist, to have your own opinions, to make your own choices, to live your own life. Your mom may not have been able to see that, but that doesn't change the truth. You exist, you're real, you're separate, and you have every right to live as such. But wait, before you go, I need to tell you about something that few people mention: the dynamics with siblings. If you had siblings, you probably noticed that the narcissistic extension wasn't divided equally. Usually, one child becomes the main extension, the one who carries the weight of the maternal projections, the one who isn't allowed to exist separately. The other siblings may have had different experiences. Some may have been ignored because they didn't serve the mum's narcissistic purposes. Others may have been treated as secondary extensions. Still others may have found ways to escape the radar altogether. This can create complex dynamics between siblings. The sibling who was the extension may resent the one who was ignored, because at least they had freedom. The ignored sibling may be jealous of the one who was the extension, because at least they had attention. Both are wrong and both are right. Neither of these positions is healthy. Being an extension and being ignored are two different ways of not being seen as a person. Another important thing: gender often matters in this dynamic. Narcissistic moms often choose daughters as primary extensions because the identification is more direct, because the daughter can realize dreams that the mom had as a woman, because the daughter can be molded more easily into the model that the mom desires. This doesn't mean that sons aren't treated as extensions. They can be, especially if they represent something that the mom desires. The son can be the extension of her professional ambitions, of the ideal husband she never had, of the man she would like to be if she could, but the dynamic tends to be different, and it's often the daughter who carries the greater weight of the maternal narcissistic fusion. Let me also talk about something that confuses many people: the difference between an overprotective mum and a narcissistic mum who treats you as an extension. An overprotective mum may be excessively anxious, controlling out of fear, suffocating in her worry, but deep down she can see her child as a separate person. She's afraid that something will happen to him, not to her. The narcissistic mum who treats you as an extension can't make that distinction. When she controls, it's not out of fear that something will happen to her child. It's out of fear that the child will escape from her. It's out of fear of losing a part of herself. The fear is about her, not about him. This difference is subtle but crucial. The overprotective mom, with help, can learn to let go. She can recognize that her fear is excessive. She can work on it. She can celebrate her child's independence, even while feeling anxiety. The narcissistic mom rarely changes, because the problem isn't anxiety, it's personality structure. It's the fundamental inability to perceive the other as separate. According to Jung, this inability stems from a deeply rooted complex within the mother's psyche, a complex that distorts her perception of her child's individuality. If you're trying to figure out what your situation was, ask yourself this: when you tried to be independent, did your mom get anxious for you, or did she get personally offended? Did she fear that something bad would happen to you? Or did she feel betrayed by you? The answer will tell you a lot about what the true dynamic was. One last reflection on what it really means to break free. Breaking free from being an extension doesn't mean hating your mom. It doesn't mean cutting off relations necessarily. It doesn't mean rejecting everything she gave you. It simply means this: choosing to see yourself as a separate person, with the right to exist, with the right to be different, with the right to have a life that is yours, not a continuation of her life. This can be done while maintaining contact. It can be done by visiting at Thanksgiving. It can be done by being a good son or daughter. The separation is internal before it is external. It's about how you perceive yourself, not about how many times you call. When you know you're separate, contact with your mom stops being threatening. You can listen to her without being absorbed. You can love her without losing yourself. You can be close without disappearing. That's the true freedom, not physical distance, but the ability to be present while maintaining your integrity, to connect without merging, to love without getting lost. And that freedom is possible. However impossible it seems now. However deep the marks of the fusion are, you can become whole, you can become separate, you can become you. Before we end, a question for you. Did your mum treat you as an extension of herself? Did you grow up not knowing where she ended and you began? Comment down below. I want to know your story. And if you have an experience to share, even a brief one, it can help someone else who is still trying to understand what they lived through. If this video resonated with you, consider subscribing. Every week we bring content like this, exploring the truths about family, childhood, and psychology that most prefer to ignore. Ring the bell so you don't miss any videos. And remember, the fusion may have been imposed by others, but the separation, that's a choice of yours. A choice that you can make every day. A choice that leads to the only place worth arriving, yourself. Until the next video.